problems on there.
Let me know if I'm moving my head around again. Yeah, how's this?
There it goes back.
Sorry about that. That's all technology. Don't know what happened there, but it got stuck. Were you able to hear what I was saying though, or just did the screen just freeze, or did everything freeze? Let me know. Thanks for the welcome backs. Okay, I want to know if I need to say all that again, but everything froze. Everything, or just the screen. Okay, well, I'll backtrack a little bit, but Providence couldn't figure out what side of the war they were going to be on because there was a relationship between Recking Crew and Legacy. So obviously they're going to, if they enter the war, and Recking Crew did enter the war, didn't they?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And you entered obviously on the side of Legacy.
Correct.
So that would have been weird if Providence had decided to enter the war on the side of Legacy as well, right? That would have been an interesting situation. But they didn't.
I mean, no. I mean, we would have come up with something. I mean, outside of the war, we probably would have just settled down with them and then did what we need to do in the war and then come back and start back over. But no.
Yeah, and you did put pressure on Providence, but at a certain point, you guys offered them like a truce, right, or something.
Yeah, back in April, and that was turned down.
Right, because the Marians are a proud people.
Yeah,
Amar Victor.
So they're like, take your truce and be gone, and so the beatings continued, I suppose, and then what happened recently?
The beatings will continue until morale collapses.
What happened recently where things started to go really bad for Provi? It's like people start to leave, and this is only in the last few days.
But it's the same story with Provi Block. It repeats every few years with them. They start building up. They build up the morale. They get what they're doing, and then they start falling apart again because they get pressure put on them. Because their leadership, basically just old dogs. That you can't teach an old dog a new trick. They think that what they were doing 10 years ago, 5 years ago, still works when it comes to how to run a region or a block or whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't. With the meta changes in the game and everything happening, you can't run a region or your block the same way anymore. You have to be willing to adapt, and they're not. And that's what happens. They get a little pressure on it, and you see the structure just start falling apart, and people leave. They get fed up with it. They come to Provi to crab, essentially, or learn how to be a nullsec. And they get pulled into Provi Block side of things. They get that Kool-Aid thrown at them, and they drink it up, and then they realize, that's not really what's going on, and they end up just leaving or jumping ship and joining our side. We've had a lot of guys approaching us asking if they could join TRC,
looking for a better situation in the same area. Yeah.
So it's been interesting to see what's going on. I mean, they're falling apart right now. I think there's a lot of cracks forming within Provi Block, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
So we saw what happened because something leaked, and that was...
The ping that got leaked to Reddit of Twilight Winter, the head of Total Eclipse, telling his alliance not to form up for the snuffed out Fortizar timer to defend their Fortizar.
But these are the cracks I'm talking about. Is that they're the cracks that are within Provi Block right now. I don't know much about all of that. What I do know is they were going to form, and then they were told to stand down, and then they formed again.
On the other side,
to come in and try to help Snuff, and but there was a lot of like, well, Twilight saying, don't form up, and other side or other parts were saying don't form. But there's a lot of fracture between the FCs and leadership. There's the communication between their teams is just not really happening.
That's wild.
Yeah, Spot here was saying that Total Eclipse is in the process of leaving.
Yes, that is true from what I've seen. Total Eclipse and Two Maidens, One Chalice. Is that right? TMOC something.
I hate that name.
It's a stupid name. I think they're part of a little group that are leaving. Where they're going exactly, I don't know. I know they're moving out to Losec to try and figure out what to do next, but that's a couple of sov holders already on the list of getting out. And unfortunately, almost every day I talk to somebody else and find out that list is expanding rapidly.
It's cascading. That's why they call it a fail cascade. It's famous in EVE Online. When a group starts to fracture, it weakens, and then it all implodes. Everybody starts running. It used to be a lot worse. Now there's a lot more. There's a lot more safety mechanisms, so fail cascades are rarer than they were.
They still happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, the intention with RC and Tier C was never to push it this far. It was always just to take a small little portion of the region and make it our own, and just use Provi as a place to farm content. And
they don't like it when you say that.
Yeah, but that's been true. But yeah,
well, yeah, it's been true over the years for a lot of, like you were saying earlier, people come to vacation here, and that's whether to mine or rat or even just farm content. They come in during wars and they like, what can we do next? Oh, let's go to Provi and farm them. Cool. And they do that for a few weeks or a month or two and do that. And then you see Provi freaking out and saying, oh, we're being invaded again. And then they freak out and you see people start leaving or moving or evacing, and then they disappear for a little bit and then they come back and try to rebuild.
Okay.
Take to go this far. It just sort of happened with the pressure we were putting on them, and EQ being having all his pride, and basically turning down certain agreements that we had sent his way because of that pride, and it ended up just pushing us to be like, well, if you're not going to do that, and then they pulled in Snuff to go after a Keepstar, and when they did that, that's when it kind of also turned the tide for us. It was like, well, if they're going to do that, we're going to just go after them.
Yeah, so I can't read the name. G-Man here says, I don't get it. You're discussing internal Provi politics, but don't seem to actually have a Providence person to discuss it with. Seems incredibly one-sided. Yeah, it is one-sided, except, well,
half of the people here are ex-Provi. Well, yes, it is one-sided and biased. I'd have to almost throw that back at Provi in that they regularly get invited. They'll say they don't, but this is an open show, and they just never. And it's been a historical thing for Providence. They just do not outreach to media outlets in any way or form.
Yeah, but we've also been watching their internal workings, right, and talking to people from internally.
But yeah, almost.
They certainly have a point of view, but there's facts on the ground. That's the other part of it. I got to finish this because I got to run for a second. And that is that what is happening is real. What the motivations are, that could be somebody's interpretation, but they have had Villy now intervene. I don't know if they had him or if Villy offered to do it or if Villy just did it on his own, but he intervened, and now there's an NIP, so Providence can have a bit of a breather. Can you guys talk about that? I'm going to have to go there.
Yeah, since it was brought up, I can, because that was something that I was trying to avoid talking about. But since it's brought up, yeah, it happened the other day. The Provi spin is EQ said he went to Villy. It's not 100% accurate, but whatever. We're all going to spin the story to our favor anyways. But yes, essentially Villy came over, talked to our guys and their guys, and basically worked out a non-invasion pact for the next 2 months, starting today at 2000 Eve time.
Hello.
Hey, Jim.
How's it going, Eros?
Good. How are you, sir?
Not too bad, you?
You were just talking about the non-invasion.
Gian is. Can you tell us your position in Provi, or are you just in Provi?
I'm a senior FC within Providence.
All right, great. Let's have a discussion. I will be listening.
And you're the executor of Two Maidens, right? Or was that wrong?
Is that your alliance? Terrible name. Terrible name. All right, I'll be listening.
Dude, I made it when I think I was 16 at the time, so give me a little slack.
I can see why a 16-year-old would find it funny.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things that I mean, I've been playing Eve since I was 12, so I've sort of grown up in a very not exactly ideal environment. Yeah, I mean, I saw the shit with the chat, and just wanted to. I mean, since it was said that Provi has been invited before, I figured, hey, I'll ask if I can come on, just to give a little bit of inside backstory. Because I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing going on isn't necessarily untrue. It's more just that it's not exactly. It doesn't actually seem to sound right, I guess, without like proper insight.
Yeah,
Like,
two of us here are affiliated with RC, so we obviously have a different perspective than you do.
Right. I mean, like I said, I can give my version of what.
Yeah. So where do we want to start? I mean, obviously, there's not much I can. I mean, there's not a massive amount I can go into due to internal stuff. But I mean, as basically anyone from anywhere can tell you, I'm about as neutral as you can possibly get in Providence, because I mean, I've repeatedly headbutted with other leadership on terms of internal politics, so you don't need to worry about me trying to spin shit. I mean, if you're really worried about that sort of shit, message Rocket now, and he'll tell you that I'm fairly neutral in terms of all of this.
So we were just talking about the non-invasion.
Yeah. So that, despite what the ping says, that actually, I mean, I'd like to think that I was one of the main ones that actually pushed for that, since I was pretty much the only one within Provi actually willing to talk to Rocket and actually try to push it with him. Obviously, as I said, I can't go into too much for the sake of I don't really want to share private conversation details, but essentially, it's the problem is that like I don't want to like reveal too much, because like I'd probably end up getting either kicked or whatever. Essentially, with Providence. I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. Like, Providence hasn't been in an amazing state as of recently. I mean, we've had some incredibly good forms. However, I mean it's fairly easy to just see that RC has been allowed to grow to a stage where, well, I mean, as you've seen, you've been able to outform us on several EU time zone timers, and whilst I do believe that Providence has the capability to to actually repel that, I don't think it's something that's necessarily realistic with what we have at the moment. And yeah, as I said, if you just want to go over whatever stuff, and I'll try and give whatever context and sort of, give some sort of fair trial, I guess, of sorts. Because I'm as I said, I'm fairly neutral in most of this, but obviously, if we can get Provi side to all of this as well, it makes it a little bit more more interesting, I guess.
What I'm curious about is what was the... Because I know that Timok and T had made their decision to move on, leave, whatever it is, before...
What do you mean by that?
Well, Total Eclipse is evacing, and every time they talk about it, they keep talking about...
So
it's called Timok. Timok is... they refer to Timok as going with them.
The thing is, I mean, you refer to them as evacing. Like, what do you have to back this up? I mean, because if you look at it objectively, you're saying that Total Eclipse is evacing. Yeah, if you stop looking at a single group and trying to single different parts out to divide a coalition, if you actually look at it as a whole, there's plenty of people moving stuff to safer places within the coalition.
Yes.
I mean, just the other day, like there was a Super and a Titan that were killed trying to move out of Providence. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a point of everyone's trying to evacuate out of Providence. I think people are finally starting to realise the danger.
I'm referring to a ping from Total Eclipse. Executor
but you see, I was just listening to the stream. You were literally saying that Total Eclipse and Timok or whatever were like agreeing to leave the coalition or whatever, or like leave Providence. Like, I'm interested to hear.
Is that not untrue?
Like, no, and I'm interested to hear like where you've actually heard that or where you've sort of come across that information. Because I can tell you now, even with RA, like, I mean, we're dedicated to being in a secure and safe NRDS environment within Providence, like long term, like regardless of what happens. Like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. I mean, we are. I mean, there is people that are moving out expensive assets, but the thing is, that's happening probably wide for the simple fact that it's the sensible thing to do. I mean, if you could imagine, I mean, you're in a defensive war and the enemy's grown to a point. RC has always had an overwhelming super capital and Titan force. They haven't dropped it constantly in the past. However, it's been at the sort of strength where if they get a decent form and they're confident, they will happily drop it. However, as of late, obviously they have grown to the stage where they can. I haven't actually seen them drop it recently, but that's more to do with the fact that they have been able to match us a lot easier on sub caps than normal cap levels. But I think it's fairly sensible, and I don't think anyone here is going to doubt that. And if you do, feel free to talk up and explain why. But I don't think anyone's going to doubt moving out expensive, maybe not quite necessary assets to have in Providence is the smart move. Because if shit did go incredibly south, then
you're absolutely right. But I'm not going to share the posts publicly. But I would have thought it would be obvious right by now that I have eyes in the Total Eclipse Discord, and I can see the discussions about leaving. The discussions including Timok, potentially APOC, and Total Eclipse all leaving and discussing different plans on where they're going to go. But it's otherwise confirmed they absolutely are 110% leaving. They're running constant jump freighter services to get everything out. There's no denying that they're leaving.
I mean, as I said, moving expensive shit out that we don't need in Providence at the moment. There's no real need for us to for people to have in Providence anything less than doctrine ships and shit to make ISK with. I mean, it's purely a precautionary measure for the simple fact that, as I said, RC has gone to the point where, even with this NIP, it's incredibly uncertain at the moment for the simple fact that if this NIP wasn't a thing, even with the help of Snuff, don't get me wrong, Snuff is a strong entity, but at the moment they're not quite. They're not really at the level as they were before. And I wholeheartedly believe that even with the help of Snuff, which, for the record, I am incredibly against, and there was a lot of arguments yesterday over all the thingies, all the ops and shit to do with the Snuffle result, which I'll go into a little bit later. Even with their help, which again I'm incredibly against, it's not really something that's going to help or secure Provi in the long term. But I mean, at the moment, in terms of Providence, the only real thing that really needs to stay in Providence is ships to mine / rad, like just make basic ISK with, and doctrine ships to join fleets with.
I understand that, but that's not what's being said.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't even think I'm in Total Eclipse Discord, but what I can tell you on a leadership level, since I mean I'm quite close with Apocalypse Now and Total Eclipse leadership, is that at least on a leadership level, what I've said is basically the consensus. And I mean, if there's individuals in alliances or whatever that are moving all their stuff out, it's not really condoned. I mean, if that sort of shit is happening, then
It's.
if it's happening, it's happening. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's not something that we're really condoning. I mean,
Right.
we are. I mean, at the end, we essentially have. I mean, it's a fairly fucking cheesy common thing to say, but we do have our members' interests at heart. I mean, like we are, like I mean, which is exactly why we're trying to, make sure that people have the core stuff that they need to operate functionally as a Provi group in Provi. And aside from that, just like if there's like unnecessarily blingy shit or whatever that is potentially at risk, just get to a safe place.
I'm
Like,
going to
not
have to
the-
challenge
not
you
the-
there
not-
because I just wanted to find it and I found it. So you've got directors within Total Eclipse talking about an imminent fell cascade within Provi Block, saying that they just need to keep good relations until everything's evac'd. Like, I understand you need to make things seem a bit better for the health of you and your own, I suppose, is one way to put it. You do genuinely have your guys.
as I said, dude, like I mean, I'm talking about I'm talking from what I've experienced and what I've discussed with leadership. If other stuff is happening, as you're saying, like people are moving their entire stuff out, like that isn't really what's been discussed or condoned. I mean, if that's happening, then that's dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I mean, as I said,
sanctioned.
yeah. I mean, as I said, like I guess I'll be discussed at some other time. But yeah, I mean, there is the same consensus within leadership channels, and I mean, there has been a lot of drama over the last few days within Providence that has sort of accelerated a lot of people's views on things. And we are, we are trying to stick with it as long as like possible for the sake of the coalition. Because at the end of the day, although I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, you can talk to Rocket if you really want. I mean, he'll vouch for it, but I personally don't really agree with a lot of stuff that's been decided Provi-wise for the last however long. However, I do. What's it called? I'm sorry, I'm terrible at talking today.
Right.
I do try and do and act in the interests of the members of the coalition, because at the end of the day, I mean, Providence has probably been one of the only groups that I've actually sort of felt at home with, and I do genuinely love all the members of Providence, despite whatever shit happens in leadership. And
Do you reckon the CVA is going to stick around in the region?
I think I'm in a really shitty spot here, dude. Because
I'll back off. Don't worry.
I think CVA is going to do what's best for the coalition.
They do seem
well.
Would they be motivated? They're quite there.
I hope CVA is going to do what's best for the coalition.
Yeah,
I know that RA is going to act in the coalition's best interest. I mean, obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, RA, which stands for Red Alert, is a sort of initiative between a few alliances within Provi that essentially it's basically just like a big special interest group between us that basically we just wanted to have like a higher standard of living within our separate alliances that we couldn't push to probably wide. So, like stuff like more organized. So, I mean, we've been looking at stuff like coalition SRP, well, not coalition, like SRP for our sort of red alert group, like standardized background checks and all that sort of like stuff that isn't really able to be pushed upon the entire Providence coalition, but stuff that we ideally want to be implemented within at least our groups.
That was reasonably successful, was it not?
I mean, I'm not going to say it was reasonably successful because it's something that it's still being worked on. I mean,
yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have used the word was.
Yeah, it's fine, Data. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a work in progress. I mean, there was a certain amount of backlash from it because a few people may have thought that it was some sort of takeover attempt, but of course, we tried to squash as much as possible because the simple fact was we have no intention on. We had no intention, and we still don't have any malicious intentions on Providence. All we care about is doing what's best for Providence and preserving the NLDS spirit.
What's your view on the NIP? Like, what do you think the end goal is there? Because it's not.
Well,
it's not forever. Obviously, it's got a deadline.
I mean, that's. I'm not really sure if I'm allowed to say or not, but I mean,
you're allowed to say no. That's fine.
Well, no. I mean, like I was saying, like since I'm I'm pretty much the person that like pushed Rocket into trying and into actually getting that NIP sent. It's another thing where I know. I guess I just know too much, but for the sake of the show.
Well, that's always a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like this is the thing. I came on trying to defend the Provi's point of view, but obviously, when you're in a position where you know sort of what's happening, you can't share too much. I mean, I'm just trying to think of a way to actually sort of give you some sort of information that like gives a bit of closure, but doesn't really compromise our position.
There's never really going to be closure because it's very much a story in progress, really, isn't it?
I mean, so regarding the NIP, I mean, it's basically. I mean, I personally have been pushing Rocket to propose a non-invasion pact for. I think about a month and a half, 2 months ish at this point now. I think
we offered a non-invasion pact back in April.
I did hear about that, and I have sort of talked about. I mean, I did basically say in some leadership channels, okay, like why the fuck was this one not taken? But from what I've heard and from what I've talked to Rocket about, I can't actually. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I've never actually been able to get like original chat logs of the actual conversation where like terms were discussed and actually offered. I mean, I've seen chat logs from Rocket saying like this was on the table, and then RC leadership decided that it weren't viable after some self-val or something. But like, I mean, again, I'm not saying it didn't happen. All I'm saying is I personally haven't actually seen the original chat log of like, okay, like here's what the NIP is, and like all like I haven't personally experienced or seen that chat log. I mean, if anyone wants to send it to me, feel free, but until I actually see that chat log, I can't really make any assumptions or
one of the
decisions based on that.
Terms I found interesting in that the leaked NIP broadcast is why are medium structures excluded? It's an odd thing. At least in my experience, that's odd.
Well, I mean, I'll be straight up with you. I mean, I have no real. I have no real bearing on what's included in the NIP. I pretty much just did all I could to secure a NIP. I mean, the actual terms of said NIP, they're beyond me. I mean, my entire goal was to give Providence leadership and the ability to actually be able to say, okay, like this is an actual deal that's been like, like the details have been explained to us by Villy. Like there's a solid chance that this is going to be accepted. Well, I mean, I'll go on to that little bit in a second. But yeah, I mean, like that was my entire goal there, just to get that opportunity for them to do the right thing. Because I mean, there is a lot of discourse within Providence at the moment with a certain few members basically saying, "Hey, like, what the fuck? I didn't agree to this. Like, oh, like, how can they just like pretend that they like run everything or whatever? Like, oh, like." Like,
I think we know who we're talking about.
It's not even just that, dude. It's in certain other channels as well. But it's just incredibly frustrating because we have quite a few people that aren't actually willing to, like just like see the writing on the wall. Like, I mean, I personally love the idea of like fighting a losing war. I mean, not necessarily fighting a losing war, but like fighting on the fighting on the underdog side. Yeah, I mean, because in obviously with, for those that don't know, I mean, in like early TMOC days, my alliance, we were constantly fighting outnumbered against Ashra Khan and their fucking constant Shadow Cartel map phones. Like, I know what it's like to fight as the underdog, and I know how fun it can be at times. But the problem is, quite a few of these people that were arguing against like the whole NIP and stuff, they didn't seem to understand the difference between fighting for the underdog side and knowing when the fuck that you need, when you need a fucking break. Because I mean, regardless of what position, or like regardless of what the position is for any group or anything in a war, fighting a defensive war for 2 years straight, where your enemy is just getting stronger and stronger, that is not sustainable. That is not healthy, especially when your enemy is like pretty much completely unhindered in terms of money making.
It's tiring for both sides, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously my main point there is, obviously, although it is tiring for both sides, when you're fighting completely defensively, you're not going on any offensive timers. It creates an environment where your aggressor, in this case RC, whenever they get tired, they can just stop aggressing and like crab up some more risk, do whatever, and then as soon as they go back on the offensive again, like that cuts your risk, like that completely cuts like a lot of your coalition's ability to even make risk. Whereas obviously, since they're fighting an offensive war, they've still got all their crabbers at home doing whatever they please. So like it's a sort of thing where we've constantly been on the defensive and we've never really been able to catch that much of a break, which I don't blame anyone in particular for, because I mean that's a hard situation. And I mean, when I joined probably about 2 years ago, we were definitely in a position where we were in a position where we could quite easily stomp over RC despite the super blob. That was, as I said earlier, I mean that was mainly only really when RC had like large numbers on, but aside from that, we're at the point where we're forming a large amount of caps in our cap fleet, as well as like a massive sub fleet, and we just sort of didn't really go too much on the offensive. I say that as sort of, I guess that could be construed as me blaming others, but I mean I also take responsibility in that, because at that time I was quite an active main FC in Providence, and I mean, looking back now, I mean, I probably should have been pushing for a lot more aggressive plays, but hindsight and all that.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than looking back and going, "Oh crap."
Yeah. I mean, the main thing really is looking at the past, figuring out what you could have been doing better, how you should have been acting in the future, and reflecting that on the present and future to make sure that you're following a much better path, which Providence sort of has a difficulty doing. we sort of fall into we sort of fall into a bit of a paradox where no matter how many times we see things not work in the past, we sort of keep insisting that we follow the same path. Which, I mean, I'm not trying to shit on Providence or anything. I mean, I'm just saying it how it is. I mean, I've said it quite plainly and cleanly in leadership channels. I've gotten quite a lot of flack for it over the years. However, I'm still here, so I'm assuming someone on some level appreciates it.
Well, regarding the NIP, how were you involved in the creation, if at all, Eros, from your side? Or was it like here's a new agreement, you got to sign on the dotted line, you're already in it, or did you actually get like a input? How does that work?
We had a meeting
process.
Yeah, no, we had a meeting about it, but aside from what was in it, it was basically the higher levels of RC, basically Rocket and EQ working out the details. And as far as like the NIP from April, it's pretty much the same offer that we made to them back in April. Almost exactly. But as far as my role in it, I didn't really have one. We just kind of talked about it, figured out what we wanted to do, and then we said, okay, cool, done. And then we just, what's up?
By any chance, I don't know if you're able to do this or not, would you be able to send me like some sort of manuscript or something from the original offer of the NIP? I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, I've never actually been able to. I mean, I've asked countless times about it on both sides, and no one's been able to provide me with any logs or anything about it. I mean, just for my own sanity, I'd love to be able to actually see the discussion. You know, obviously, if not, then no problem. But
I mean, I don't know if I think it should come from Rocket if he wants it, because it's one of those things where it's like sensitive higher up material. Like I don't want to send all that out.
Fine. That's fine. I'll message him.
But yeah,
I'm just super curious about this medium structure exception. It just seems odd to me. I'm sure there's probably nothing to it, but
you know what it is. You know what it is. I think it comes. Go ahead.
I mean, I personally, judging from what I've seen from Marcy in terms of behavior and what I've sort of been told about, like going from like leadership, I'm assuming that the medium structure exception is for the simple fact that, I mean, RC. I'm assuming the more solve oriented groups, so like it's like TRC and Co were probably more, and obviously you can confirm or deny this, Eros, but I'm assuming you were more interested in more aggressive plays against Providence, where you didn't quite care as much as what would happen to Providence. But but from what I'm guessing, I'm assuming Rocket and whoever else like discussed the NIP. I'm assuming they were more interested in making sure that there were actually an enemy to fight. Because I mean, although I can definitely see the from an enemy point of view, the incentive behind fully pushing Providence in for the sake of, okay, yeah, we killed Providence. Obviously, that isn't exactly healthy for a coalition that's just built up to your sort of level where, I mean, you're basically at the sides of Providence. But obviously, if you kill your only opposition, you're in a sort of position where you're like, okay, do we turn into a renter region? Do we like go and fight in some block war? Like, do we try and like go make a name for ourselves like somewhere else? That's what I'm assuming meant behind the medium structure thing, because obviously a full NA, like a full non-aggression pact, would just not do. Whereas with a NIP excluding medium citadels, I'm assuming that's mainly to do with just focusing on hitting medium citadels in hopes of defenses to actually provide content.
Exactly.
It keeps moonfights open, I suppose, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to kill the content completely.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's on both sides. You know, Provi gets content out of our side as well.
Yeah, I understand that, and there's one or two that do understand that. However, most of Providence is basically just under the idea of, okay, we want to kill RC so we can just go and do whatever in peace. And whilst I do understand that, that incentive with Providence members, I do have to agree with the RC stance on things of as much fun as it is, like absolutely thrashing your enemy, it is not fun at all in the long run when you have no enemy to fight in like 2 or 3 months.
Well, and that's
that's
at least
this is this is something that's also been this is something. Obviously, I'm from an FW background, obviously in a mar militia, and this is something that happens basically yearly in the war zone, where one side builds up, kills the other side, and then we're just sitting there for like 6 months. Like, okay, where the fuck is where the fuck is any fights? Like, why is there no one to fight? Like, I've been, after that experience in the war zone, I'm incredibly cautious about like over farming or like going in for the actual kill on a group, because obviously it's not sustainable in the long run, because by killing your main source of content, you indirectly end up killing yourself unless you have a solid plan to actually provide said content.
Well, I think we're pushing the clock a bit here and running out of road potentially on this for now, because I know there's a lot that can be said to either way, but at least a lot that can be said that's not allowed to be said, shall we say, that we don't want to. Airing out leaks and stuff like that isn't necessarily the nicest thing, even though I will admit I have done that in the past.
Give it a week or two, and there's probably a lot more to discuss.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys want to message me like on Discord whenever you're like planning to do something, I'm more than happy to come on again.
So,
and I mean,
I will put you on my list, because I usually end up pinging, for example, Marth or something like that. But the nature of these shows is generally they're a bit ad hoc, so it wouldn't be. We didn't plan that we're going to talk about Provi, like 8 hours before the show. It was 15 minutes before the show. What have we got on the cards today? Oh, that's the thing. But as I said, it's an open show, so yourself or anyone else from Provi is always welcome to just come along, say whatever they need to say. As long as it's civil, it's always allowed.
That's fine. Yeah, I appreciate it as well, because obviously since I've been on the Provi side, I've always sort of seen like talking in station broadcasters like, like they always they never have much Provi representation, and like obviously I've seen a few shows that they're just like, yo, just message us, like we're completely open. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that in the future then.
Yeah,
as soon as I heard like, oh, talking stations is talking about Provi, I was like, oh fuck, I'll message Matterall, I guess.
Marth.
That's fine.
Marth does come on too, Gian, to give the Provi side of things.
Yeah.